Hi, my name is Joseph, and today I want to talk about Godzilla Minus One. It's a movie made by Toho that came out December 1st, 2023. It came out for a limited release, and it actually did so well that the individuals behind this limited release, I suppose Toho and Fandango and Rigo and all the partnerships that they had, they actually did a week extension. So if one is living in the West, excuse me, that was my cat. She knocked something over. One could check out Digimon. I'm sorry. It's because I actually did my video about Digimon, and I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of elements about this movie that kind of did remind me of Digimon a little bit. So excuse me, of Godzilla Minus One. I moved a little bit weirdly because I was debating if I should just quit this video and start a new one, but I'll just leave that in because that was honest, that little slip up. This movie reminds me of Digimon a little bit, and I'll get into that at a later point in the video. I just want to just quickly explain that again, one could still watch this if they're living in the West up until December 14th. After that, to my understanding, it will still be present in some theaters, but to a much limited scope compared to what's presently being offered. So, for me personally, this came out of nowhere. I really don't follow movies the way that I used to. I was aware that a King Kong and a new Godzilla movie was going to release, and when I first heard about Minus One, I thought that this was that movie. Well, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought that just because of the weird title, Minus One. But then I came to realize that there's no Kong in the title, so that wouldn't make any sense if this was a Godzilla and a King Kong movie. And then I came to discover, once I started doing more research, that there's apparently three avenues of Godzilla if one wants to consume Godzilla material. There's the now recently released trailer for the Godzilla versus Kong, or rather, excuse me, Godzilla and Kong. They're working, I think it's called Godzilla X Kong because they're working together now, rather than going against one another. They could watch a show apparently called the Monsterverse or something along that line. That's Godzilla focused. He's not in all the episodes, but apparently he's in a couple episodes. And then, of course, Godzilla Minus One. I'm personally very much neutral towards the legendary Godzilla. I have seen them, but I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of that Godzilla. When it comes to Godzilla, I'm going to sound a little bit nerdy, not nerdy, but just, I hope I don't sound like a gatekeeper. But I much prefer Toho Godzilla over Legendary Godzilla. And yeah, so that's why for me, this really came out of the blue. And when I did some light research to discover that all these different properties that contain Godzilla, it's a really cool time to be a Godzilla fan. Although I am neutral towards Legendary Godzilla, I will be checking out the Godzilla X Kong movie. And I probably more than likely will be checking out the Monsterverse show as well. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and focus on Godzilla Minus One. So what's up with the title, Minus One? Personally for me, so my history with Godzilla has been mostly with the dubs. I grew up with Mechagodzilla and the Godzilla fight, and also with Godzilla and Mothra, and a couple other Godzilla films as well. I also did grow up in the American Godzilla that came out in 2000, I believe, or I forgot the specific year, but the one that a lot of people don't like, with Matthew Broderick, I believe the actor's name is. I personally do like that movie. I still like it as an adult as well. I do recognize that it's not the best quality movie, but it led to the cartoon show, which I really enjoyed. And then, of course, I did watch Shin Godzilla, and as I already stated, the legendary films as well. Unfortunately, I have not seen the original. 1954, I believe, is when the original Godzilla came out, but that's definitely on my docket, especially after watching Minus One. All that history was just to explain why I believe it's called Minus One. Correct me if I'm wrong for the more hardcore Godzilla fans, but to my understanding, this is a movie in which Godzilla is just a villain. In other Godzilla movies, he's usually the good guy who's working with humanity against other kaiju or kaiju monsters. Or, excuse me, I'm not well versed in the kaiju universe, so I'm not sure how to call them plural. Or he's a misunderstood creature that unfortunately is in pain and thus causing damage because he doesn't understand himself, a la like Shin Godzilla. In this movie, Godzilla is just a force of nature. So we don't really get an origin story for this Godzilla. If anything, it's implied that this Godzilla was natural. He was already doing his own thing, but unfortunately, because of the tests with nuclear fusion and atomic bombs and everything like that, I'm not well versed about that. Excuse me, please. I won't lie. I'm ignorant in terms of that because I am aware that the bombs that were dropped in Japan there's a difference between nuclear bombs and atomic bombs. But anywho, during these bombing tests is what agitates Godzilla. it's shown really quickly, but whenever these tests, or it's also implied like towards the end of World War II, we know that how did it end? Well, the bombs, right? And I would argue that's implied that that's what angered Godzilla a little bit. And then they show a little scene of the X Tao Resort, the what SpongeBob is based on, and the test that's being run there. They don't show Godzilla, but they show the mushroom cloud, and they show in the back, and that show, excuse me, in the background of the audio, one could hear Godzilla's war. So it seems like in this movie, Godzilla was just a natural entity that was doing his own thing, but humans pissed it off because of what we were doing with these explosions. This movie very much is based more in the ocean, more with water scenes, and that was really cool. I don't think we've seen Godzilla so often in the water like in this movie, and it was done really well. When I went into this movie ready to be against it, because since I am a Godzilla fan, I don't like when Godzilla's made the villain. I much prefer when he is the hero. So because of that small detail, I went in ready to like really not like this movie, or at least to recognize that it has its merits, but to be upset at the forced, contrived way that they made Godzilla a villain. Thankfully, that is not the case here. The movie quickly won me over. It really did subvert my expectations. Now that we discussed Godzilla, we can move on to what I think is one of the best parts of this movie, the human cast, the human plot. And I think it's amazing that I could even say that. It's not just an opinion for myself. If one looks around, he watches other videos, reads other articles, they're going to recognize the common theme is not just how awesome Godzilla was, but also how awesome the human characters were too. These are Japanese actors, so excuse me if I get the names incorrect in both terms, the actor's name, but also the character's name. Please do forgive me, have some patience with me about that. I've never been the greatest when it comes to names. But I'm just going off the page right here. We have playing Noriko Uishi was Minami Hamabi. And she was the love interest in this movie. I'm not even going to reduce her to the love interest. She was the love interest slash heroine of this movie. Koichi Shishikishima, played by Kamiki Rushinuki. Excuse me, I know I didn't pronounce that correctly. He was the protagonist, awesome protagonist. We'll get more into him after I'm done listing these other characters' names. Kinji Noda, played by Hidetsuka Shushiruka. Really awesome character. We'll get more about him as well. Shiru Mushishuma, played by Yuki Yamanada. Great supporting character from the boat crew. And a part of the boat crew is, of course, Sasuke. Oh no, pardon me. It's Yuji Atsusuke, played by Kurosaku Sasaki, the captain. And then the mechanic, Sasuke Takibana, portrayed by Munuchika Aoki. And last but certainly not least, Sumuko Uta, played by Sakura Ando. So again, forgive me about the names, but let me go back before I start listing the characters and their actors, what I meant by this movie subverted my expectations. So there is going to be minor spoilers here and there, so one should just be aware about that. But this movie begins with essentially Koichi is a kamikaze pilot and he's neglecting his duty. He's choosing to not kill himself. And so before I continue, the more that one is aware about Japan's history with World War II, the more that they'll probably get out of this movie. I'm not too well versed when it comes to the details, but recently, because of that one YouTube channel who did World War One, WW2, I do watch them. And also because I did watch the Pacific and I looked more into the Pacific theater, I started learning more about the Japanese side of everything. The kamikaze pilots was something that was done towards the end of the war, when things started looking negatively, that they were going to lose. And there was also a lot of issues with not transportation, but supplies. There's also a lot of supply issues. A lot of the soldiers, the common folk soldiers, not the officers, they were going without food. They were going with rice that was expired, rice that had maggots in it, unfortunately, and they had nothing else to eat, and so they would eat that. And so a lot of the conditions towards the end of this war, and if one is aware about that, it really adds to a lot of this movie. So again, the kamikaze, there's a group of mechanics that Koichi lands his plane, and he claims that there's an issue, but the mechanics, they're confused because they can't find any issue with this plane. In fact, one of the characters, one of the mechanics, Sasuke Takibana, he kind of implies that you maybe didn't do what you're supposed to do, and Koichi, of course, doesn't like that, right? Unfortunately, Godzilla comes up during the evening time, and he just destroys this little island, Odo Island, where all the mechanics are stationed, and the only two survivors are Koichi and Mr. Takibana. And Koichi has survivor's guilt. Mr. Takibana gives him the pictures of all the other mechanics who were there. Koichi goes back home. So right off the bat, I didn't like Koichi's character. I did think he was cowardly. Not for the fact that he wouldn't do the kamikaze mission, but there's a part where he had an opportunity to shoot at Godzilla. I don't think he would have killed Godzilla, but he maybe could have helped to save some of his comrades. I thought he was cowardly. I was like, this is the main character? I don't like this individual. Then he goes back home and Sumiko is there and she starts acting very rudely because again, she's aware that he's a kamikaze pilot. So she's like, what are you doing back here? If you had done your job, we wouldn't have lost. If you had done your job, my kids, her two kids would not be dead. And of course, this just eats up at Koichi. And I'm not gonna lie, at first I was like, who is this woman? Why are you alive but not your kids? What's going on here? Where were you when the bombing raids occurred and your kids were killed, right? So again, I was against Sumiko's character. But as the story and then lastly, Noriko's character, she's introduced as a thief who forces her child onto Koichi and makes him wait for her as she runs away from not the authorities, but from the people trying to catch her. Again, I was against Noriko. I'm thinking to myself, oh great, I'm supposed to have sympathy towards this thief who's stealing after this war when everyone is suffering. But why did my expectations get subverted? Because slowly we start learning more about these characters. Noriko has a baby by the name of Akiko. They're not biologically related. Noriko was given this baby because the mom who perished due to the bombing raid, she begged Noriko to take care of her baby. And she's actually doing it. Yes, she's stealing, but she's stealing not for selfish reasons. She's stealing because she's trying to help Akiko. And then Koichi, he really turned me over when after he gets the baby, he ends up just sitting there for a long time. I've only seen the movie once. I'm planning on seeing it again next week. But I believe it's the daytime. But then it's implied that a lot of time has passed. The sun is starting to set, and he's going to leave the baby behind and just walk away. But he can't bring himself to do so. I really like that. That's when I started really liking Koichi's character. And then as it turns out, Noriko was hiding in the corner someplace waiting for him to move away from the crowded area so she could get the baby back. And thus, their relationship, although strange, this is how they end up meeting one another, and this non-traditional family becomes a family. Since Koichi now has to support this woman and her son, her adopted son, he starts trying to find work, and it just becomes a really feel-good story of how where they live is rinkety. When it rains, it's leaking. But then Koichi ends up meeting up with a boat crew headed by Mr. Noda, and the captain of the boat is Yoji Akatsusu. I'm just gonna call him the captain. And then their young individual who they call the kid, Shiru Masashima. So Koichi starts working with these individuals. They're all veterans except for Shuri, and their job is to collect the mines that were left behind after the war, mines set up by both the Imperial Japanese and by the Allied forces. And everything about this movie just ties together so well because the way that they collect the mines is essentially the plan that they utilize to go against Godzilla at the end. The second time that Godzilla makes his appearance is in the ocean again. The first time was in the island, but it's in the ocean where everyone is just caught off guard, and this little boat crew witnesses this ship being attacked by Godzilla. I'm not going to go for a scene-to-scene description, but I just wanted to explain what makes the human characters so great, and it's the fact that they all support one another. So at the beginning of the video, I said Digimon -1. The reason why this movie really reminded me of elements of Digimon was just because a group of disparate people, it's not desperate, disparate, the D-I-S-P-A-R-A-T-E, so a group of different individuals who come together and they end up forming a unique bond that, dare I say, becomes more familial or like a family than just friendship. Not only are they all willing to work together, they also care about one another. So if anyone's ever seen like Digimon Adventure, the first season, they're all meet up because they're at a summer camp, but a summer camp is usually because of different individuals coming together for this one event. and thus, despite not really knowing one another, they still end up forming bonds of friendship with each other, right? So, and not only that, but also the passion that was present within the film. Whenever one was willing to do an action that the other group wasn't willing to do, they got together to support the individual. I'm trying to be vague on purpose. Essentially, there's a suicide run that happens at the end, and all the characters are like, "No, we don't want you to do that." And it's a movie about survivor's guilt. It's a movie about forgiveness and redemption, and the way that it ends. There's some elements of the movie that's quote unquote predictable, but I don't think predictability is always a good. I don't think predictability is always a bad thing. Recently, I did a video where I discussed which one was it? Oh my goodness, Spider-Man, the Miles Morales game. Not Spider-Man 2, but Spider-Man Miles Morales. And when one is able to see what's going to come with the story, that's not a bad thing, because when it's done well, then one is able to prepare themselves emotionally for what's about to occur. And that this movie does that so well. I'm not gonna lie, there was moments where I was reacting physically, like this one part where Koichi's going to do his suicide run, so finally he's going to kill himself, right? The kamikaze element that he was supposed to be doing, he's finally going to do what he was supposed to do during the war, but then at the last minute he ends up ejecting and from the pilot's seat. That sounds like it's a bad thing, but Mr. Takibana actually installed the pilot's seat on purpose that was not present before he worked on the plane, and he actually tells Koichi that he needs to survive, that essentially Takibana has forgiven Koichi, and so has the mechanics that unfortunately passed away too. And in order for him to show the will, not just for himself, but for the people that have lost their lives, Koichi needs to survive. And Mr. Takibana starts crying when he hears on the radio that Koichi has made it. It was just a really awesome scene. I'm not gonna lie, when he put the... I knew that seat was installed, right? But when they show the act of Koichi, they didn't show it completely. It was a you blink and you'll miss it. When he poos the liver, I went, yeah, because I didn't want him to die. I wanted him to survive because Noriko at this point looks like that she has passed away due to one of the rampages that Godzilla has done on Ginsha, Ginsha, I believe the district city is spelled. And if Koichi dies, Akiko is going to be left homeless and orphanless again, 2 times, right? But Koichi, he makes a choice to survive, not for himself, but because of Akiko, but because of his bonds that he's made. And then it gets revealed at the very end that Noriko has survived, and she's actually been in the hospital. And I love how the movie ends. It ends with him in her arms, in her lap, and he's just bawling, he's just crying. And this movie does that so well. So many of the male characters, they don't have any reservations about showing their emotional state, and it was awesome. The boat crew, I need to talk about them because they were amazing as well. Captain and Mr. Noda. Mr. Noda, I loved how, again, the movie just ties everything up together so neatly. It seems like Mr. Noda won't play such an important role, but by the end, everything is going because of his plan. The captain, again, it seems like he's not going to play an important role, but the captain ends up working with Mr. Noda and even does his awesome speech where he tells Shuru that there's nothing to be ashamed of not going to war. If anything, it's a thing to be proud of. Just amazing. And I do wish that the cast listed here, another character I really enjoyed, unfortunately he's not listed here, was the general, I believe he was. But once the Mr. Noda reveals that there's going to be a special group led by civilians who are volunteers, there's a general who joins them. He was really cool as well, really awesome. There's one amazing moment is when after they being the Allied forces, after they defeat Godzilla, they all just start saluting Godzilla. Everyone from the battleships to the little tugboats that come up at the end, because apparently there's a scene in Dunkirk. I haven't seen Dunkirk where something similar occurs. For me, it was really reminiscent of Rise of Skywalker when at the end all those other civilian ships came. Something similar occurred. It was much more emotionally heavy and impactful though here than it was in Rise of Skywalker. If anything, I would argue that Rise of Skywalker wish they had that same emotional weight and impact that this movie, and I'm sure that Dunkirk has as well. I have to watch Dunkirk. I actually do want to watch it now because of that tugboat scene. But yeah, a great movie. Would I recommend Godzilla -1? Yes, I would. Highly recommend it. If one is not able to watch it in theaters, I highly suggest streaming it. I personally am going to own it when it comes out on Blu-ray. Oh, in case I forgot, so why is it called -1? I personally believe it's called -1 because of the fact that since the original Godzilla, this is the most aggressive, most villainous Godzilla that we had on screen. So thus Godzilla -1. It's a bit of a reboot, but not the reboot that we're used to. Godzilla is not a friend, an ally, nor is Godzilla a misunderstood creature. In this movie, Godzilla is just a force of nature, an apex predator. Thus, Godzilla -1. This is not the Godzilla that we're used to, but it's not a bad thing because we go back to our typical Godzilla love of Godzilla because the human cast, I would argue, really helps to balance out the villainous Godzilla. Hopefully that made sense what I said at the end, but seriously, I went in ready to hate on this movie. I went in ready to not enjoy this movie, and I came out in love with it. It had me physically reacting. If I had seen this in a packed theater, I know for a fact I would have started clapping at the end. And before I end this video, the music, the soundtrack, this movie just has it all. It has Godzilla. It has a great plot, great human characters, and of course, you tie everything up together, just an amazing soundtrack. Some of the music is, of course, songs from Godzilla and Kong, apparently some elements of Godzilla and Mechagodzilla, I believe. So the theme, it's used twice in this movie, used so well. The first time was when Godzilla is destroying a city, and the second time, and I was happy when they started playing, it's like, yes, the one has to play this theme for the human characters because they've earned it, is when they start commencing Operation Watasumi. They're playing Godzilla Suite 2 during that part. It was awesome. And then they play Suite 3 during the end credits. But there's also some original music as well, like Resolution. Oh my gosh, I love that song, Resolution. I highly recommend that one. Check out the soundtrack after you have seen the movie. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Have you seen Godzilla -1? If you have, what did you think of it? This might personally be the best movie I saw for 2023, and even possibly the best Godzilla movie. It's up there. I think Shin Godzilla does a better job in terms of the monster action, while as Godzilla -1 does a better job with the human element. Both are great though. I highly recommend Shin Godzilla and Godzilla -1. Thank you so much for watching again. I do appreciate it. Since I mentioned Digimon, I'll just go ahead and say it. Have a prodigious day and take care.